Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the IPMX booth. Today, I will give you a short overview of the JPEG XS standard and the latest updates regarding this standard and how it can be used in an IPMX environment. My name is Francois-Pierre. I'm from the IntoPix company. And in the end, I can tell you more about my company, but that's not the goal right now. So, we will cover the JPEG XS standard. It's a compression standard dedicated for moving video over IP networks and other networks where the bandwidth is limited. You will get the latest insight into the features of the codec and the capabilities of the codec adapted for the IPMX standard. So I don't know if you're familiar. Most of you are involved in IPMX, but there's a lot of products coming up getting ready for IPMX. You already have a lot of on display on the ISE show this year. So I name a few companies here. You're welcome to check on the papers we have around also to get more info about everybody showing IPMX product and the ones that also do JPEG XS compression in the IPMX products. So what is this JPEG XS standard? It's a new standard from the ISO. So you might be familiar with JPEG, maybe a bit less with JPEG 2000. JPEG XS is something else. The goal is to go for extra small and extra speed compression, meaning low latency with the best quality. Why would you want to do that? Because there's already a lot of Cat5e, Cat5.6 cable around. And most of them, you can't handle the increase of data rate, so the increase in resolution, the increase of frame rate. You can't right now do 4K over a 1 gig network. You could if you have that little bit of compression that is required to go below 1 gig. So if you want to go and compress, yes, you will need to redeploy the wire. It might not be possible. The cost would be huge to go from 1 gig or 2.5 gig to 10 gig SFPs, fibers. It's probably prohibitive, maybe in small networks, but not worldwide. You can use proprietary method, of course. There's different ways to compress. But sometimes you don't have the flexibility to go from on hardware or in software or both. And they may not be the best in terms of latency, quality, power consumption, complexity. So JPEG XS is the solution that managed to get to the sweet spot where you can replace uncompressed video to go below 1 gig or even 2.5 gig if you were talking about 8K content, and use your existing infrastructure, Cat5e, Cat5.6 cable, to move HD, 4K, 8K on existing device, existing infrastructure, off-the-shelf switches, hardware and software platforms. So as I mentioned before, extra small and extra speed. The goal is to be like uncompressed at lower bandwidth. So we will preserve the quality. You will not be able to tell the difference between uncompressed. And we don't introduce any latency. That's usually the big issue you have when you're talking about compression and codecs is the latency involved into doing the compression and the decompression. Once you achieve it, you can manage more pixels. You simplify your connectivity because you use existing cables. And you save cost and power because you don't have to change your infrastructure. And you consume less power because you transmit only 1 gig and not 10 gig or 25 gig. So the main advantages of JPEG XS within this is to keep the quality visually lossless. That's my first point. Second nice feature of JPEG XS is to keep the quality constant. Even after multiple compression cycle, you stay at the same quality level. Complexity is small enough that you can put it into small FPGAs, small CPUs, keep the power low for the compression itself, and do it fast. So in a sense, that's why it's also multi-platform, because it's simple enough to be performed on CPU, GPUs, FPGA, or dedicated ASICs. And because it's small and fast, the latency is a few microseconds. It's less than 1 millisecond. It's not perceivable by human eye. And that's also why it's not complex, because it fits into a few line buffers, which really doesn't require any external memory. It has additional advantages like scalability. I will get more in depth about this later on. And it's also an open standard, which helps in terms of interoperability versus more proprietary solutions. When JPEG XS was created, the requirements was visually lossless quality, very low latency, so less than 32 lines, and low complexity over various platforms. As an example, 4K60 you can handle on i7 processors. You can use cheap FPGAs like RTX 7 or Cyclone 5 also, so you don't need to go for the high-end ones. I wanted to go in depth into the scalability of JPEG XS. It's a wavelet-based codec, and that gives him some advantages because you can have a smaller resolution straight from the stream. So typically, if you go for a 4K input, you can perform the 4K compression down to 500 megabits instead of 12 gigabits. And you can decode your 4K stream as it is. What you can also achieve, because of the unique specificities of the wavelet codec, is to extract just the information relevant for an HD proxy straight from the compressed stream. You don't need to do scaling afterwards, after decompression. And one way you could also use the scalability is to, at the time when you do the compression, just extract a small, just send a small stream of proxy resolution, which would only use a little bit of overhead, like 40 megabits, to transport in parallel to the compressed stream, smaller ones that you can use for monitoring. And this one you can also decode as a very small proxy, just to monitor your stream before you do the actual decompression. So this is a nice features for multi-viewer applications in all kind of AV networks. A quick overview of the standard itself. The first edition was released in 2019. We are already at the second edition, where we introduce additional features like mathematically lossless compression, Bayer compression straight from the camera sensor, support of 420. And we are now close to finishing the third edition of JPEG XS with a new features that use frame buffer compression, and which will greatly improve the quality for desktop content. So I will get more in depth later on. The profiles that are available to the market right now, and the ones that are used actually, is the high profile, so the one released in the first edition, where you have the targeted content is mostly natural content. You can have screen content as well, any types of content, maybe at higher bandwidth. And it's deployed mostly in Pro AV and broadcast market, so it's good for live event, live production. The new codec, which is currently going to be discussed in the third edition, is called TDC. It's based on a temporal differential coding. It's a very technical name, but basically, it's really dedicated for screen content, which are much harder to compress, but are more static type of content, which means you can reuse some information from previous frame to achieve a better quality on these static parts, while keeping the latency at less than 1 millisecond. So we don't change the latency compared to the high profile, but we have a much better quality, which means we can compress more for the same rendering. We're talking 4K 60 down to 400, 500 megabits. And the nice feature, but maybe less for these types of market, is raw compression, which means you can construct a Bayer pattern sensor with this codec and do all your ISP processing after decompression offline. So where does JPEG XS stand compared to other codecs? If you're familiar with high compression codecs like HEVC, H.264, they can achieve a much higher compression ratio. You can put 4K down to 20 megabits. But they lack in terms of latency. We're talking latency of more than a frame, sometimes hundreds of milliseconds. The quality might not be there. And it's complex type of codec. So you need, for the encoding, you need very powerful processing power. On the contrary, JPEG XS is a light compression. So it doesn't compress as much, but you keep the quality, the latency very close to what you have in uncompressed. It works on software and hardware, as I mentioned before. And the complexity stays small. The little plus that you have with the new profile in TDC is more compression for a little bit more complexity. As you might know, IPMX is really for open standards. So JPEG XS fits in the framework of IPMX. It's a ISO standard similar to JPEG. There's already, it's published, so you can access the different parts of the codec. Part 1, 2, 3, defining the core coding, different profiles, how to contain the files if you want. At the stream level, so outside of the codec, we can map the compressed content over RTP. There's an IETF paper that explains how to do it. Interoperability has been tested with the video service forum, so basically putting JPEG XS on 2110 networks, which is also a part of IPMX. And NMOS control is also supporting compressed video content with JPEG XS. And for file storage, you have also standards to put it in MPEG-4 for video, or for single files, JPEG GXS extension. This is the little plus of the TDC profiles that will give you the extra edge when you do a screen content compression, or basically any types of video content. I'm not going in depth into this, but you're welcome to ask more questions later on if you want. There's basically some prediction involved based on what the previous frame was and how different it is that help us to reuse information for the previous frame, but the stored information is already in the compressed domain, which make it very light in terms of memory requirements. How did we assess the quality? Basically, there is a ISO standard way to define what is transparency compression. We flicker one side of an image between compressed and uncompressed, and on the other side it stays uncompressed. And if you're not able to tell which side has been compressed, then you have transparency. And this flicker test was used to determine the baseline for the JPEG XS, as there was multiple submissions to define the standard. It is transparently lossless down to 3 bits per pixel. That's about a 10:1 compression ratio. It stays stable after multiple compressions, so at the same quality, meaning you don't decrease your PSNR. we can say that we are also visually lossless. That means without comparing to the uncompressed content, you can still not see any artifacts if you watch a compressed video, down to 20:1. So that's already very close to what more complex codecs like JPEG 2000 can achieve. And even if you if you start to compress more and get some degradation, it's very smooth. You don't get blocks like MPEG codecs. That's for the original high profile that is mostly targeted for natural content from cameras. For TDC, we're targeting very hard to compress Excel spreadsheets with different colors and unpredictable successions of pixels. And we can easily go down to less than 1 bit per pixel and still maintain the same quality as uncompressed for this type of use case. So this is really targeted for this Pro AV market, KVM extenders and things like that. What kind of compression ratio can you achieve? What kind of bandwidth can you transmit your video over? Depending on your resolution and your color sampling. Basically, HD, you go from 4 gigabits to 500 gigabits. The sweet spot is the 4K 60 444. You go from the 16 gigabits uncompressed down to between 400 and 750 megabits. That means less than 1 gig. That means Cat5e cables, basically. And even 8K 60, which normally ranges up to 60 gigabits, you can put over 1.5 to 2.5 gigabits. That's also Cat5e cables, providing you have the 2.5 gig switch behind. You also can use the same cables for multiple streams because you're way below what you can achieve on one Cat5e. If you go for HD, for example, you can put up to 6 streams in 1 gig. In terms of quality, we do quality assessment using the PSNR. And this is just a comparison between the high profile and the TDC profile at different compression ratio. So you can see a small increase of quality on natural content, but it's not that much relevant. What's more interesting is on mixed content. So content that has static content and also moving content at the same time in the same screen. And you can see the improvement of TDC. We're talking between 10 and 20 increase in decibels in PSNR. So to give you an estimation, if you're over 36 decibels in PSNR, you're already visually lossless for human eye quality assessment. And for machine vision, it's a little bit higher, but we're way above the machine vision requirements when we're over 50 or 60, 40, 50 decibels. So basically, what you can go home with is IPMX with JPEG XS. You have a lot of advantages because you don't need to go for high-end connectivity. It's flexible, scalable. You can put it on different platforms, software, hardware. And your pixel rates can be increased using the same infrastructure, or you can put multiple streams instead of one. So you basically upgrade the capability of your equipment if you introduce JPEG XS in your networks. Thank you for attending.